All right, guys. So I came across this video a few days ago, and I've been trying to double back and do a reaction video on this. This is my first reaction video, really, kind of ever. I really haven't done these, and but in this case, I'm going to make an exception because what this man is saying is absolute nonsense and completely unbiblical, has no biblical founding or grounding whatsoever. But the thing about it is he speaks it with such confidence, and it sounds so good. And if you didn't know the Bible, then you'd be swallowing this right up. It'd be like, oh yeah, that's it. That's the answer right there. It's just unfortunately that basically almost everything he says is untrue. So they're talking here about the Sabbath. This woman here has some friends that are talking about keeping the whole Levitical laws, and I'm just going to play the video and kind of let you guys hear it, and then I'll respond using some scriptures. I'm going to sort of refute some of what this guy, Mr. Frank Turek, I believe he's an apologist. So I'm just going to play the clip and let you guys hear it, and I'll give my response.
The Sabbath doesn't go into Sunday. The Sabbath has already been fulfilled. Jesus is our rest.
Again, there's no real scriptural reference to that whatsoever, but I'll continue.
Okay. I did not grow up like this, but I have good friends that are messianic, and they believe, of course, since we're grafted into the branches, we're kind of held to, of course, we get God's promises from Old Testament, New, but also we have to hold like the Levitical law, and they kind of question me as to why sometimes I go to church on Sundays versus Saturdays. And I don't know sometimes quite how to answer them. I know general ideas on how to answer them, but I don't know.
So are you saying that there's...
Okay, so just stop. Just for context, the entirety of the Levitical law contains a lot of things regarding dietary restrictions, what is clean, what is unclean, sanitary restrictions, along with sacrificial rites for animal sacrifices. So that's a whole, that's the Levitical law. And so that's the context here that she's talking about. But then they get into the Sabbath stuff. So
saying that you have to obey the Old Testament law.
Yes.
Okay.
And here's the thing that charismatics like this guy do is, and I don't know if he's charismatic or if he's Calvinist, or I don't know really what denomination he belongs to, but charismatics make this make this assumption when they say, when they read the word law in the New Testament, they automatically assume they're talking about the entirety of Old Testament law. And that's not exactly true. There's many different laws. So there's many different laws in the Old Testament. So you have God's universal law, you've got the law of Moses, and then you have all of these Levitical practices, which were also attributed to the law of Moses. So, but they kind of just lump them all in one category and say, oh, it's the law. That's just the law, which is not quite accurate.
Here's my question. How can you obey the Old Testament law?
I think it's impossible.
Huh?
I think it's almost impossible.
It is literally impossible. Why? There's no temple. How can you obey? Well, there's no temple. How are you going to obey the Old Testament law?
Well, they say, I guess, until there is a...
Okay, you see, this is the kind of sly nature of this. It's like, oh, well, there's no temple. How are you going to obey? How are you going to obey the whole law if there's no temple? And the thing about it is, like, the whole law wasn't centered around the temple. Like, the sacrificial rites was centered around the temple. The feast days were centered around the temple. But the Ten Commandments had nothing to do with the temple. So the cleanliness and dietary restrictions had little to do with the temple. So it's like, you kind of they kind of just, you see what I mean by they just kind of lump it all into this one category, and you really, if you're going to look at the Old Testament in a honest way, you really can't do that.
Temple again, but also like the little, like as far as they feel that where does the Sabbath go into Sunday, and they question a lot.
Okay, well, okay, good question there. First of all, the Sabbath doesn't go into Sunday. The Sabbath has already been fulfilled. Jesus
Okay.
is our rest. You see, out of the 10 Commandments, 9
I'm going to stop right there. The Sabbath has already been fulfilled, right? No scriptural reference to that, because there is no scriptural reference to that. There's nothing in the Bible from Genesis to Revelation that states that the Sabbath has been fulfilled and that Jesus was the fulfillment of the Sabbath. And the Sabbath stops from the point of Jesus' death and resurrection. Nothing in the Bible that says that or states that. So that's, just wanted to put that out there for the record.
9 of them are repeated in the New Testament. The only one that isn't is keep holy the Sabbath. Why? Because the Sabbath.
Why? Because it was commonplace and wasn't worth repeating. That's why it wasn't reiterated in the New Testament, because they were all Sabbath keepers. All of them. All of Jesus' disciples, Paul, all of them. James, the brother of Jesus, every New Testament author kept the Sabbath. So why am I going to waste time talking about something that everybody is already doing? So how about talking about something a little less obvious, like idolatry, which is kind of obvious too, fornicating, lying, adultery, not being meek, not being holy, not those are the things that Paul focused on. Paul focused plenty on the other stuff, but why reiterate something that's common knowledge that everybody already knows? So that was just a part of the culture in the time period. So that's, again, no scriptural reference to the abolishment of keeping the Sabbath day.
Sabbath represented rest, and Jesus is our rest. In fact, Paul even says in Colossians chapter 2, don't let anyone tell you have to obey any Sabbath or festival day. Why? Because our rest has arrived. We rest in the work of Jesus. And so the reason we meet on Sunday is because we're not transitioning, or we're not transferring the Sabbath to Sunday. We're simply saying he rose on Sunday, so that's the day we're going to meet.
But that's exactly what they're doing, though. They're transferring the Sabbath to Sunday.
Sabbath represented rest, and Jesus is our rest. In fact, Paul even says in Colossians chapter 2.
Okay, so he's saying that Jesus is our rest, so that and he's not the first one that I've heard. This isn't unique to him, by the way. There's a lot of people that believe this, that the Sabbath day rest, the holiness of the Sabbath day, the sanctity of the Sabbath day was transferred from a day to the person and being of Jesus Christ, and in his death and resurrection we rest, and yada yada. So I guess what they're saying is, instead of keeping the Sabbath holy, you believe in Jesus, and it's like every day is a Sabbath day. But with that logic, then nobody would get any work done, because you'd just be resting all the time. The point of fact is that when the Bible talks about resting, and Jesus is talking about you're being asleep in death, because you're sleeping in Jesus, awaiting the resurrection day. So that's the rest in Jesus that the Bible talks about. But as far as Sabbath keeping, there is no connection made biblically from keeping the Old Testament Sabbath, or the Old Testament Sabbath being destroyed or abolished and transferred into the person of Jesus. As a matter of fact, you have Jesus himself stating in Matthew 5, verse 17, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled." Okay, till what be fulfilled? Well, until heaven and earth pass away. So the law hasn't gone anywhere. The only thing that's left is the sacrificial rites that were bound up in the temple, because the temple isn't here, so we can't do that anymore. But the rest of it is still applicable. It's very much so. Jesus said it himself. Not one jot or tittle will pass until all be fulfilled. Until what be fulfilled? Until heaven and earth pass. We're still here talking about it. So that's the very proof that all has not been fulfilled. He's just saying that Jesus' death makes it fulfilled, but again, there's no biblical premise for that.
Don't let anyone tell you have to obey any Sabbath or festival day. Why? Because our rest has arrived. We rest in the work of Jesus.
Okay, so the scripture that he's referencing is Paul talking to a whole bunch of converted pagan. He's speaking to a church that he's set up, converted a bunch of pagans into Christians, and they're very confused, and they're doing a lot of mixing with paganism and introducing pagan rites into Christianity. And he's telling them, don't do that. Don't you forsake your idols, forsake your Sabbaths, because pagans had Sabbaths also, forsake your new moons. None of that stuff you have to do anymore. That's gone away with the old pagan stuff. What you need to focus on is Jesus. But guys like this will read that and say, oh, well, they're talking about the Lord's Sabbath. And you know that you're talking that when you read in the Bible where it's talking about the Lord's Sabbath, where it's talking about the commandment Sabbath, it's with a capital S, and the other Sabbaths that are not related to that are lowercase s in the Bible.
And so the reason we meet on Sunday is because we're not transitioning or we're not transferring the Sabbath to Sunday.
Yeah, you
We're
are.
simply saying he rose on Sunday, so that's the day we're going to meet.
And that's another fallacy right there. There's another theological fallacy, is that Jesus rose on Sunday. If Jesus died on Friday evening and he rose on Sunday morning, that's 2 days, maybe a day and a half, depending on the time he rose on Sunday. So that's not even 3 days. The Bible said he died, he was dead for 3 days and rose again early on the third day. But the fact of the matter is that they were getting ready for Passover. And the 14th day of Abib was the first day of the Passover, which falls on a Wednesday. That's the reason why they wanted him on the cross before the evening fell, so that they wouldn't be transgressing any of the Passover rites for having to do labor on the high Sabbath. So, and the high Sabbath is what they were preparing for, and that falls on the 14th day of Abib, which is a Wednesday. So he died on Wednesday, and he probably rose again very early in the morning on the Sabbath day, which would have been Saturday. So not Sunday.
Has nothing to do with the Sabbath.
Right.
All right.
Also, with regards to the promises, such as like Jeremiah 29, other prior ones in the Old Testament, they said, since we're grafted into the branches, we received, even as like Gentiles, or how you would say, but we received those promises still. I don't know how to.
Yeah, I think we're grafted into the one olive tree that Paul talks about in the book of Romans. But that doesn't mean that a promise made to exiles who went to Babylon 2,600 years ago applies to them or us. That applies just to them who were there at the time. It doesn't apply to Jews today or Christians today.
Okay, so it only applied to them at that specific point in time. So you're talking about all the Levitical laws only pertain to that time period at that specific moment. That in and of itself is nonsense. And I mean, when you're talking in regards to Sabbath keeping, anyway, you have in Exodus chapter 31, verse 16, he said, "Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant." So perpetual means repetitive forever. So it's to be repeated perpetually. Who? The children of Israel. And who are the children of Israel? Well, all the children of Israel that are, of course, by blood, born in Israel, and a part of the 12 tribes of Israel, which now only 2 tribes exist, which is Benjamin and Judah, and the rest of the 10 tribes are lost to antiquity. And then you have those that are Christians, bought in through the blood of Christ, who have now been adopted into the sonship and commonwealth of Israel. And if we, as Gentiles, are bought into the commonwealth of Israel, that's what Peter says, we're bought into the commonwealth of Israel, no longer strangers, but fellow citizens of the commonwealth of Israel. If we are to believe that Peter was not lying there, which I don't believe he was because it's scripture, then chapter 31 of Exodus, verse 17, applies directly to us, even as it stands in wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. In the 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. So I don't know about you guys, but forever means a long time, right? Forever is eternity. Like, that's forever, for as long as you live. Like, that's forever. So, but just to say, oh, well, that's just for some people that gathered together for that time. That's only for them. Where is your scriptural reference for that? But not only that, but if you go to Revelation, and I love to pull this one out when we're talking about this subject. In Revelations 12, the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. The remnant of her seed is the children of Jesus Christ that were bought in by his blood, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So this is the end of time that we're talking about here. The end of time that keep the commandments of God. So, but what this man is saying, that commandment keeping is we're no longer subject to the law. So no commandment keeping, no Sabbath keeping. Then who are the people in Revelations 12:17 that are keeping the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ? Not just for the Jews. This is for everyone. This is for everyone. This is for everyone that believes in Jesus. That's what this is talking about. So, yeah, again, it pays to know the scriptures, because listening to guys like this, they'll deceive you. There's a bunch of wolves in sheep clothing out there, guys. So anyway, thanks for watching. Take care.